Hello again.
Hello to you. So some people say this comes through better on speaker view, which I don't know if I like. I don't know if it'll record it on speaker view or not, though. I think it's mainly Instagram. Instagram, if I'm in the middle of the screen and you're in the middle of the screen, it gets half of us. We both have to like move to one, the right, I don't know which side of the screen, but one particular side. So I have a hard time keeping it on speaker view. So because I like to see all of us the same.
Well, hey,
So
I just work here. You guys figure out all the tech.
Right. They might not be happy with me. Hillary, if you're not happy with me, just let me know. If you want me to go on speaker person, whatever it's called, I can. Oh, okay. She says we're doing some changes. Stay in gallery view. And when you listen, please keep your video on and just mute yourself. Okay. Thank you. She was like already sending that before I even said it. I swear she reads my mind.
I could believe it.
Incredible. You're incredible, girl. Kent Smith doesn't think he has a Zoom link, so let me send it again. You can tell we're very organized in this organization.
I know.
We are so professional and always get everything right.
We are always professional.
Oh, all right. Well, he'll be joining us in just a second. While he's doing it, I will do our intro. Welcome to Relational Revolution Live. We are modeling and inviting this week. We're modeling the value shifts for practicing church. It's heart-to-heart connection. And we're inviting others to join us by training. I had a few people sign up for Church 101 or sign up for intro calls today, I think I saw. So that's exciting. And by funding this global movement. So far, we don't have our funding information on the website. Like we don't have our goal or how much we've raised to reach our goal. So we're working on getting that on there. But our goal is $3,000 more in monthly donations, not one-time gift, but monthly donations. So we are asking God to move in people's hearts. We're asking people to listen to God about funding this movement so that we can continue to train and do the things that you're seeing on these calls this week that we do with all of our leaders all over the world. So I think we have 100 so far pledged. So I think we're down to 2,900 as a goal. So every single penny counts. So that's exciting to hear that we're down there. And if someone is increasing their donation, it might not register. So just let us know. Let us know that you increased your donation. community@luke10.com, I think is our email. And just say, hey, I increased my donation $50. So that way we know and we can add it into our thing when you see it on the website. So everybody knows how we're doing. There he comes. All right. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Hi, Kent.
Hey,
You're muted.
Yeah, I remember we're supposed to keep it real this week, so I tried to show up at the right time.
It makes me think of a quote that we heard from George Barna some years ago, where he said, talking about church, he said, you can either be excellent or authentic, but not.
I was going to say the same thing, Kent. You're making sure you just, give everyone a real experience of what it's like.
What you all don't know is that Kent is generally fashionably late to most calls. But we love it anyway.
Yes, always. So guys, do y'all want me to frame this for people who are watching us live? Maybe no one's there at all and this will just be us, but maybe there's people eavesdropping our conversation. And would you like me to do the summary of what this is? Yeah,
Sure, go for it.
All right. And then y'all can add in if I've missed something important. So John and Kent and I have been working together on the research and development or resource and development, the R&D team for almost 9 years now, writing books together, woo, which is amazing, and developing learning pathways, developing pretty much all of the learning curriculum material, whatever you want to call it, that we use, our leader lessons and whatnot. Overseeing the mission of the organization as well, together with others. So we do a lot of work together and a lot of creative work as well, which, as you can imagine, with some strong personalities on this team that we have, we can bump up against each other a lot. So we've done that a good bit. We've learned some really good tools and how to fight well, I think. And we're still learning how to use our conflict to forge intimacy together and to forge deeper heart-to-heart connection and deeper secure attachment, if we've been throwing that word around a little bit this week, with each other, instead of our conflict blowing us up or sabotaging our organization, even sabotaging ourselves, right? We do that a lot too in our lifetime. So we're hopefully helping each other not sabotage our own journeys as we lean into these things together. So we've been meeting for the last 2 months, every Tuesday and Friday, really, for an hour to try to talk about some of these things that are getting in our way, so to speak. Does that sound like a good intro?
Yeah, that's great.
Anything else to add?
Well, something I would add, I think one of the things that most people who have grown up in normal Western, maybe American life at least, is that conflict feels like a bad thing. Conflict has all these things that kind of at a gut level, a visceral level, make us feel fearful. And part of that's no doubt out of a lot of our experience. We have, as you said, Tony, we've seen relationships blow up. We've seen teams blow up. We've seen organizations blow up over unresolvable conflict. And so conflict has this big aura of kind of doom and gloom and bad news about it. But in fact, what if it were possible to imagine that conflict is actually an invitation to something really good, an invitation to grow, an invitation to hear in a new way from God and from the reality that God expresses. And for us, not only individually, but collectively, to be invited into something that's more whole and more attuned with reality. What if we began to see conflict more as opportunity? And I'll just have to say that's been a long journey for me to move from the place of being terrified by conflict to becoming more and more at home. I wouldn't say I'm there, but more and more at home and more hopeful around occasions when conflict arises, because I've had a bunch of experience at this point, and on this team in particular, in seeing how conflict actually does do the things you were saying, Tony. It actually grows us. It actually makes us closer to one another. It actually empowers us to work more effectively and powerfully as a team. And so for whoever's listening, even if it's just us three, but for whoever's listening in on this, one of the things that I think this conversation hopefully will give you is some fresh hope for seeing the power of conflict as a constructive, transformational tool in the hands of God and in the hands of God's people as we learn how to work with conflict in that way. So yeah, I'm all in on this conversation, excited to see where it'll take us.
I think I'll add one or two other thoughts on that, Tony, and then we'll get into the specifics. So I think working on leadership teams like this, where you're working close together, has some similarities to marriage, right? It's close relationships. And I love the internal family systems people and the way they think about that. In marriage, they say that your spouse is your tormentor. That is, God will use this other person and it will feel like a tormentor, but God uses, in my language, God uses to touch on places in my own soul, my own internal family, where there's still trauma. It's usually wounds from my past that get triggered that cause me to be defensive, protective, all those kinds of things. And so, as Kent is saying, it's actually, if it's done well, it's actually a good thing, because it's part of the healing process of uncovering those things. Again, internal family systems uses those conflicts as trailheads. They're the beginning place of an internal journey that I need to go on, and you guys help me do that. So that sort of reframes what conflict is all about.
My husband says it will either be this relationship will either be a pathway to growth, or it will be pathology, a pathway to craziness in all of us. So we can either cultivate it to pathway to growth, or it'll become a pathology. Either way, it's a path.
Usually it starts with uncovering some pathology at the beginning.
Mhm.
That's right. Well, and I think it's good to say that, like marriage, it also triggers family attachment wounds, like you were saying. And so the only way to let those surface and work through those is high degrees of safety. And so I think that I was thinking through kind of what tools do we have, or what helps us create path towards intimacy, right? Or, as you were saying, transformation, Kent. And we can name some of them here. So what are some of the tools that we use so that, because it doesn't just happen, right? There is no way conflict just naturally becomes a path to intimacy. In my experience, it's never happened. So how do we cultivate that so that it does become that pathway? What are some of the tools you guys have seen us using that you would name?
One of the most important, we haven't done it in this meeting yet, but one of the ways that we create an ecosystem of grace, the very climate in which conflict becomes constructive, is by always making a point to check in with each other. Something about, turning on those gratitude gateways that open up our relational circuits, and hearing each other around that. And then, checking at an emotional level. There's just so much discernment of the body of Christ, to use good biblical language, New Testament language, that goes on when we enter every conversation, significant conversation, taking time to notice who's in the room with me, whether it's a virtual room or a physical room. Who's here? Where are they? What's already up? What's God already up to in the lives that I'm looking at right now? And what is it that God is inviting me or all of us to be paying attention to join God in what God wants to do? I think, the safety that gets produced by that is the absolute backdrop. It's the cultural sort of air that we breathe that makes our ability to deal with conflict constructive over time. Over time, we know this is who we are and this is where we are, and that makes it so much easier to deal with whatever conflict does arise.
So wait, Kent, are you saying that our Church of Two practices, that simple structure of checking in and listening, is actually what we use for conflict too? I mean, it's just used for everything, isn't it?
Yeah. So I have a question. Are we going to keep on going with this conversation, or are we going to check in?
I think that's a great idea. Thank you so much for reminding us. John and I have been together already once today, and so I think we're feeling changing.
Yeah. You're already discerning the body. I'm the newcomer here. Yeah.
But thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Well, since I've already, so when you're checking in, and especially telling appreciation stories, the nice thing is that you can often use the same one in different settings. It's still what I'm feeling. And I actually start my mornings off. That's part of my time with the Lord, is to sort of check in with him. And so that prepares me. So I don't show up at a meeting thinking, let's see, I wonder where I am. So what I checked in with in a previous meeting was a feeling of amazement and gratitude over our ecosystem of grace. So Luke 10 ecosystem, one of our 5 core values that we talk about in our book. All these gifted people, everybody contributing something, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And so thinking about this relational revolution live and what's happening over these 4 days makes me so grateful for Hillary and Zach, who just have gifts that are way beyond anything I have. I mean, I'm like in kindergarten on technical stuff. And I probably Hillary dreamed this thing up. And I've never heard of a church or a ministry doing what we're doing here, of inviting the world into our inner workings. I just maybe they're doing it. I've just never heard of that. And I think that's so creative. And so I'm so grateful to those 2 guys. I'm sure Tony's had a lot to do with that as well, for putting this together technically, but also then creatively. So checking in, amazed and grateful to be part of an ecosystem like this.
Thanks.
Well, maybe I'll springboard on that one. Yesterday was really a beautiful day for me. Several conversations that I had were so encouraging. One was with Tony, where we got to talk a little bit about dynamic governance, divine governance, and talk and reflect on this amazing ecosystem that God has brought about in Luke 10. And last night we had a meeting with our Eden community. We meet every other week to just kind of talk community business, and we checked in as usual before we got started, and then we got into some really important conversations around housing and all that kind of thing. But what was making me feel so joyful yesterday was 3 women, Tony Daniels and Laura Kellerman and Shannon Kazmarek, 3 women who I've now known in every case at least 10 or 15 years, but who are doing such a brilliant job of creating space around them for people to have deep and meaningful conversations, safe conversations that get really important things done, but at the speed of attachment, at the speed of love. And so, kind of like you're saying, John, I just feel so privileged to be living in a world right now where a lot of my closest relationships are people who get the things that we're talking about this week and have been practicing it for a while. And the goodness and the health of that is just amazing, and it's delightful. And so I feel just deeply grateful today for that.
Thanks. It was stellar. Yesterday was stellar. I'm so excited about that podcast going out. Okay, so as I was preparing for our meeting and I was just asking God for some appreciation, I can't help, and you can see it's just taken over my face. I cannot help but remember us on our writers retreat last year, in October, November, when we were writing this book. And literally, actually, we were writing Jesus Led, and then heard God say, maybe you should write this one instead. And we were like, okay. And then we did it. And which is incredible for us 3 to work that fast. But the memories I have are us going to lunch with Karen, and we're at Dos Margaritas, right? Was what it was called. And our video making out on the lawn, on the front lawn. I think it was the closest thing I saw John to playing. Was making those videos, and you even made some really funny ones that no one will see but us. But
for a contribution to Luke 10, we might be willing to show you some videos of Tony. So let me know.
So just such a delightful time with you guys. And so I'm was remembering that. And of course, I feel honored because you 2 are kind of spiritual giants and you don't really know that. And I think people don't realize it either, because you're hidden gems that the Lord has been protecting and hiding for some reason. And then you kind of, well, Kent, this is like your thing anyway. Your personality anyway is to kind of subversively influence everything that you're involved in, and no one even knows it's you. You've even subversively influenced John White, which is really incredible.
I like use the word sneaky. Kent says,
Sneaky. I think that's the only way to influence John White is in a sneaky way. But so it's an honor to be with both of you. And I still pinch myself that I get to be in the rooms with you and write these books together and do things like that. I don't know how I got here. So I'm just thankful that that I get to be here. So that reminded me of that. Thank you. All right. Do we want to just lay out a few other things that that might come up in our conversation that are tools that we use, so that if we throw it out there, it's already been kind of talked about a little bit, so people aren't surprised.
Yeah.
I'll make a couple of comments. One is the whole checking in. I just want to use the word cumulative. I believe the value of checking in is cumulative over time. Do it once, it's a really good thing. But as you do it with the same people over a long period of time, it builds, it deepens attachment as you do that. It's almost imperceptible, but there's something long-term about that that's really important. A second tool that we have found to be really, really helpful is what often is called speaker listener. Speaker listener is a way of slowing down a conversation. I usually get in trouble when we're moving too fast. My brain takes me places that it's not good for me to go. So speaker listener basically says, instead of both people kind of talking at the same time, you designate one person as the speaker. We say that person has the floor, and the other person is the listener. And the listener only has one job, and that is to listen to the speaker and to repeat back, restate, reflect, however you want to say that, what that person is saying. I think of it as a feedback loop. So here's the speaker and here's the listener. The speaker is sending a message over to the listener. The listener then sends that message back, sort of restates it, ending with a question. Is that right? Did I get you correctly? Speaker can then say, yeah, that's exactly it. Or they can say, it's not quite it, it's more like this, and they send that back. And so you go through a feedback loop until the speaker can say, yeah, I think that's really it. That's what I'm trying to say, both on the content level and the emotion level. We're listening for both. By separating those two roles out, speaker and listener, it makes it much easier to do a good job really listening. And then, of course, you can trade places. And so the other person can be the speaker, they can have the floor, and so on. So we've been practicing it for some time, but we've learned a new thing, I think, about speaker listener in the last maybe few weeks. And that is that we need to slow it down even more than we have in the past. And so we decided that we would actually take one whole session for Tony to be the speaker and me to be the listener. And I'm writing notes and I'm reflecting back. And then I can take 3 or 4 or 5 days to reflect on that, come back to her and say, let me just say it again. Here's what I'm hearing. And then I can take the floor and she will be just the listener. And that's been a huge help to us. One other thing I'll say about speaker listener. By calling speaker listener, I think we're just describing the mechanics of it. One person's speaker, one person's a listener. I'm beginning to call it by a new name, and that is compassionate listening. So you can get the mechanics right without really getting the heart of it right. I have violated that many times myself. And so framing it that way is a way of listening compassionately to the other person really makes a big difference.
So these are structures that y'all are talking about that we're putting into place to kind of slow down the atomic bomb that could explode, right? To kind of bring down the temperature. And time is crucial. It gives us the space to look at ourselves, to listen to Jesus more, to listen even in my own head to the other person during the days that we're not meeting, as opposed to just responding off the cuff. It really, allows us to get God's perspective, I think, on that as well. So those spaces have been crucial. And we noticed that the only way one can give space like that is because there's already some level of healthy attachment or trust that's built up enough, that I know I can take that space and it's not going to jeopardize the relationship at all. So that's been really helpful. So those are great structures. We have a few more like I statements and pauses, timeouts. I need to take a break and go get myself together for a minute because I can't stay with y'all. And all that is in great communication courses. If anyone's interested, they can ask where to find some of that stuff.
Tony, one more thing I'll add there. Having a third person,
Yeah.
especially if it's a really hot topic, it can be really helpful. So you and I get to practice. Keep your listener a lot, and Kent gets to watch and coach us in that and notice where we're kind of getting off base. That's occasionally he gets in the middle of it, but really but having that third person can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And on the timing thing, you mentioned it, both of you mentioned it in different ways, but I would just say that is such a huge piece of this. Everything in me, at least, wants to get things resolved, wants to get them fixed as fast as possible, wants to press on to solution. And I think what we've been learning is when we're dealing with really intense and deep things, that is simply impossible. You can't do this kind of deep work quickly. And so, as you said, Tony, sometimes we'll just call a timeout in the middle of a conversation. And you're really good about calling yourself out, saying, I am in a place right now where if I go further, it's not going to be constructive. Give me 3 minutes, give me 5 minutes, whatever. And that's so powerful because that's attending to our own truth and our own experience of whatever the situation is. And it enables us to kind of get back into the conversation where we're listening instead of just reacting. But as John said too, to settle into the reality that intimacy grows at the speed of attachment, right? The pathway to intimacy is mutual self-disclosure, and we can only do that at the pace that we can receive one another where we are. And so sometimes, again, when we're dealing with really big issues, it is super helpful to say, okay, here's some things that I really need for you to hear from me. And I don't need your response right now because you're going to need some time to process this. But I want to be sure that we take all the time we need for you to hear me out, and that's a great gift that everybody in the process gives, to make sure that there's space to hear the other person out. And then, in our case, sometimes we've got an hour to give to it, and then we really do need to take a 3 or 4 day break and let that person kind of absorb, process, and begin to formulate how do they want to respond to that. So that's new territory for me. But what I can say is that when we do that, all the parties involved mature in profound ways. All the parties involved grow in understanding of one another. But also, for me, it's been hugely self-revelatory. Even when you guys are working through your stuff, and I'm the listener, I'm seeing things that you're sharing that apply directly to me. And so if we're willing to slow it down, as John said, and then slow it down further, I think the rewards are great.
It's beautiful. Thank you. So that structure is those structural elements help slow things down and help us keep it safe and keep the person priority, the relationship priority, instead of being right. And then I'm going to name 3 things quickly because I want to jump to our process. So you're going to have to look them up on your own, but I'm going to throw them out there for you. The Enneagram is something that we fiercely use, and it has been so helpful. I think it has saved our relationship, honestly. IFS, internal family systems, work in all of our parts, and the Emmanuel approach and Emmanuel prayer. 3 tools or languages that we are becoming fluent in because it helps us understand each other better, understand ourselves better. And some people hate the Enneagram because they think they're put in a box, but that's not the point of the Enneagram. For me, the Enneagram reveals the box that we have already been in and that now we can break out of. But it also helps. John and I are both very aggressive types. We're aggressive personalities. And if we did not appreciate the strengths of each other, we would destroy each other. And so the Enneagram has helped me appreciate him in ways that I never would have on my own. And I think vice versa, right? And it's also helped me identify my weaknesses so that I can protect him and my organization from my weaknesses and actually mature in them, because that's an adult role, learning to protect others from myself. And so that's what the Enneagram has done for me that has been incredibly helpful. And we might throw some of those terms around here today. So I just wanted to give a heads up. It's all on the internet. You can go find it. There's tons of free stuff out there. But we definitely use it probably every time we meet.
It gives language to describe what's going on.
Yeah. And the Enneagram is also birth, the way you manifest is birthed out of your pain, out of a trauma that you've had, or the way you interpreted the world. And that brings compassion for me to know why John is the way he is, or for him to understand why I'm the way I am, helps us have more compassion towards each other as well. Okay. So we have been processing conflict for months now. I would love for us to just debrief where we are in this process, because we're not done with it. And how we realized we had a problem. I think that's fascinating, because, that's the first step, right? Is to go, we have a problem. So from each of our perspectives, and I don't know who goes first, but I would love to just kind of think, how did we realize we had a problem? And we haven't rehearsed this. We don't know what each other's going to say. This is kind of our first debrief on this. So how did we know we had a problem, guys?
Well, I would be glad to start. At least one part of my place. So I would say, well, Enneagram wise, I'm probably an 8, which is often called a challenger or a protector. And I'm highly oriented towards seeing threats, seeing problems. In gifting, I have a sort of a prophetic gifting as part of me. And so I can read, and I think a specific situation without naming names, that I read something that someone had written, some well-known author that we've appreciated, wrote something, and I kind of felt this thing rising up within me of saying, I think he's totally wrong about that. I think he is really off base, and I totally disagree with this, and I think it's actually dangerous. And so I'm kind of going on about this, and Tony is getting more and more upset with me about this. And
but in the past, you wouldn't have known. You would not have known. That was last week. I'm talking about, how did we know we had problems at 2 months ago, 3 months ago? How did you? One of us said we need to start talking, and I don't know which one of it was. Kat, do you remember? I remember my part of it, but
well,
I don't know.
Why don't you prompt us a little bit? You have something specific in mind.
So we were in a pressure cooker because we had some grant opportunities come up, which triggered mission stuff and triggered all kinds of stuff. And we didn't have a lot of time to talk through it. And when I get a plan, sometimes I want to run with it if there's a deadline, especially. So I will tend to just kind of lead. And sometimes I feel like John stands in my way. And I also, so that was going on. And I'm like, why is he contrary? Why is he constantly criticizing me? Which a 3 on the Enneagram, which is a performer. I like my supervisors to appreciate me and like what I'm doing. I don't like them to criticize me. So I was feeling criticized constantly during January and February. And yet I felt like I was doing a really good job. So I'm like, I don't understand why he's criticizing me. So that was one kind of manifestation that I went, what's going on here? That John's criticizing me a lot in my mind. So he must be upset with me. There's something going on. I've done something to make him mad. So that was my first red flag. Second red flag, which is fascinating. Notice that my red flag is that I think he's upset that I've done something wrong. Okay. That just tells you everything about me, because I was completely suppressing any feelings I might have had of hurt or pain because I suppress my emotions. So when I stopped to reflect on what I might have done to make John upset, I realized that and we were having meetings, and anger would start to seep out of me in meetings. And I said a few things to John in some key meetings that probably disrespectful, and hurt his feelings. Right. And I would leave that meeting, and I was very well aware of what I had done, because I don't want to do things wrong. I like to do it right all the time. So when I leave, I go, oh, I really said some things that could have hurt his feelings. Why did I say that? Like, what's going on there? Right. So that's when I started doing some self-reflecting and realizing that I had some hurt and some anger that I had been stuffing for about a year and not talking about at all, because I didn't want to talk about it because I was afraid. So back to that fear that conflict could erupt. Maybe he won't listen. Maybe he'll be like other relationships in my life who turned it on me, blamed me. So those fears were there. But the red flags were me disrespecting him and him criticizing me. So I'm like, okay, guys, in the future, if at any moment you become critical of me, John, that's a red flag. Or if I become disrespectful, boy, we need to stop immediately and go, okay, what's going on? All right, that was my point of view. Kent, did you notice all of that? And what tipped you off to go, yeah, y'all need to talk?
Yeah, I mean, and listeners will appreciate this if we broadly say that the life we've been invited into is a life of love, and we find ourselves in relationships where people are not loving one another in the ways that they're communicating, then obviously there's something that really does need addressing. And so the clear emotional level of discomfort that was coming up in some of those meetings made it clear this is a time to pay attention. So just to give you a compare and contrast, I have been in so many church staff meetings, organizational meetings, academic meetings where that kind of thing is not addressed until the rupture is irreparable. And so I think, the good thing is that, in all of those contexts, we would have said we are seeking to be God's people. We're seeking to live lives of love. And yet at the most foundational level, our core relationships, even in the leadership, were often not reflecting that love at all, especially as we were relating to one another. So, I think to have the capacity to notice it, and then better yet, to have the capacity to say, and we're not just going to notice it, we're going to do something about it. We're going to create the space to really take the deep dive into this stuff and deal with it. That for me is one of the refreshing and beautiful things about this relationship.
One of the comment there, Kent, is what often causes us not to notice it is we have a job to do here. We have a task. We have a mission. We're doing something important for God. We press through this. Let's keep moving on this thing. Instead of saying, wait a minute, the relationships are more important than the task.
Yeah.
Actually having to live that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, the conflict drains a lot more energy than actually working through it. I was much worse the 6 months I was ignoring it and it building up inside of me than the last 2 months where we've actually been talking about it. Yeah. That's released tons of energy and growth. So it was much harder to avoid it than to lean into it. John, were you noticing those red flags, or was it more you did notice that we hurt your feelings? I think that was Kent and I both hurt your feelings in one meeting, and Kent came back around and said, I think we hurt your feelings. And so that felt like maybe the triggering meeting where maybe you even said, yeah, I think there's some things wrong here. And that's where we started to talk, possibly.
I think that's right. And the way that tends to come out in me is I get angry. So I grew up with a father who wasn't a very good listener. So there's some trauma inside of me about not having a voice. And so when I feel like I don't have a voice, I get angry, and that doesn't help anything. But noticing that is sort of my cue that that's what's going on inside.
I think it's important for me too to say that when when we all realized the red flags were there and we needed to talk, it takes a lot of maturity to use the silence and the time away to actually look at yourself instead of forming a case to take down the other person. And I think the first days when I was pulling aside, I literally was journaling every day. And I was journaling about all the things that John had done to hurt me and make me mad, because it was the first time I was actually acknowledging that I was mad, right? I had been suppressing that. I had actually been suppressing it, doing appreciation for John, recognizing all his strengths and trying to do all this great mental work that looks so healthy to try to keep him in an honorable place in my mind. But at the same time, I was suppressing that I was hurt. And so that's how it kept seeping out. And I was trying to keep it in a box, but it wouldn't stay there. And so actually acknowledging the box took a few days for me. And had I engaged John during those days, it would have been terrible, because I just would have gone off. I really would have in really bad ways. So I ended up instead asking Jesus about all of this and what he wanted me to know. And I sensed him say, you need to get a coach, because you're up against some really big stuff in your leadership and in who you are moving forward from here out. So get a coach. And I was like, okay. So thankfully had Jesus as my coach. And then I had a good friend meet with me once. And then I actually hired a coach finally. And in that time, for me, realized where I had been wrong in all of this, and realized that I had been suppressing my feelings, that I had been treating John as if he's not capable of handling the hard things. Because the fact that I'm hiding it from him and not wanting to share with him that he's upset me means I don't think he's big enough to handle it. I don't think he's strong enough to take criticism or constructive feedback. And so that wasn't serving him or loving him at all. And so that thankfully I could then move into why do I do that? And it comes from my dad as well, and my parents, and the way I was raised and how I reacted and responded to that attachment. And so opened up a whole world for me of healing and growth, realizing some of those things and being able to lead with that instead of leading with all the things that make me mad about you, which was a totally different way to start, right? So how was that for you, John, when I showed up that day and you had no idea what was going to come out of me? Yeah. And I started with, this is what happened with me and my dad. This is how I dealt with it. I shut down emotionally. I pull back. I try to take it on myself. I try to handle it myself, and I just don't bother you with it. But I end up separating a little bit from you. And I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, you were very vulnerable that day. And that touched my heart. It softened me to see you doing that. And I realized that you were being a really good model for me, and that's the place I needed to go. You used the phrase build a case. And I think also you said in the past that the thing that keeps you from going there is the fear that you're going to be harassed, criticized, shamed, blamed, all that kind of stuff. I have a part of my internal family that I call the prosecuting attorney. And he also at the same time has been getting busy building his case. And so, you lie awake in bed at night, well, I'm going to say this, and deal with this on. And so your model helped. It also helped that I could tell that prosecuting attorney, there will be an opportunity for you to share your perspective. It's like I can help him kind of quiet down, calm down. It's going to be okay. You don't have to protect me. You don't have to defend me. And when I can do that, then I can enter into that conversation with you where you shared how you were feeling, places where I hurt you. And I could just stay in that role and really hear you. So those things helped me in the process.
I'll let you share, Kent, too, but I want to just say that when you did that, John, when you listened and you didn't become a defense attorney or prosecuting attorney, when you just listened to me, I remember crying by the end, and you guys asking me, what are you feeling, Kent? What are you feeling, Tony? And I was like, wow, I mean, just the fact that you would listen, that you would listen, that you would hear me, that you would value my process, that you would value me in the middle of this. That felt very formative and healing for me. And that's when I realized, I think I have a container here that I'm going to get to grow in. Like, I'm really going to get to grow. And wow, that is incredible. It's incredible. So
that's the compassionate listening. And for me, I almost am aware they have to go to a different place in my brain. There's the place, the prosecuting attorney. There's another place that really is a good listener. And if I can shift over to that, that is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And back to one of our earlier points that I think what you all have been saying illustrates so powerfully is the good Holy Spirit is the one who is always at work to bring the shalom of God into the community of God. And the timing on all these conversations was impeccably perfect, and it was often delayed. So, we had planned to meet, pretty regularly, weekly, if not multiple times a week. But there were stretches in there where, for various reasons, we couldn't all get together. Schedule-wise, you guys both had significant health issues at points along the way, and all of that slowed this down further. And so there were stretches where we'd have a meeting, and then we'd have to wait 10 days or something before we got to kind of pick things back up. And in my former world, in my former life, I would have been so anxious through all that. We've got to get this fixed. We got to get on with this. But because we have the Holy Spirit as our coach and guide in all of this, I think the timing has been just right. There were pauses when there needed to be pauses for us to get past some of those emotional humps, where we were not ready to really share. And had we just been following some kind of a rigid schedule and unopen to things happening as they needed to, it wouldn't have worked. There's no formula for this except listen to Jesus and let him lead. And as much as we would like to have a simple, handy dandy way to fix all possible problems, the truth is that the only universally effective answer to shalom is God, the source of all peace.
So where did any of us ever have this modeled for us, right? In my home growing up, this kind of thing was not modeled. It's, what my dad said went. That's the end of the argument. There's no more conversation. No, what I said. And so, there are ways in which, when Tony, you and I trigger each other, it's almost like I'm back being 14 years old. And all this old stuff is kind of coming.
And I am too. And there's two teenagers going at it, and Ken's like, oh, here they go.
We have one adult in this group, don't you think? But and that's my hope for.
No, he might go hide under the table a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I think one of the great potentials of the Luke 10 community, that it is made up of a lot of people who really have made significant progress towards being elders, being spiritual grown-ups. And we have a community where we're beginning to learn how to do this kind of thing. And I think the way that we learn it best, read a book on conflict management. But when you actually get to see it, when you get to be in the middle of that, Tony modeled vulnerability for me. And that's more powerful than any book would be.
Yeah. As you're talking, it occurs to me, there's like phrases going through my head that we use a lot that help me continue valuing the time involved, the process involved, right? Because I am a doer, an activator. So I do have to reframe, because I could get like, oh, we're not getting anything done. We've got so many things to do. What are we doing? We're just talking. So I wanted to say some of those helpful things that we share. One of them is we say and I know this comes from Fierce Conversations or one of these great books, but a healthy organization is defined by how many difficult conversations it has, that you can almost gauge how healthy an organization is by that. And so that comforts me. I go, well, we must be healthy because we got so many of these. So we're doing good. So reframes, right? Trust the process. What Kent was saying, you just trust the process. If we get delayed, we're going to listen to Jesus even more. What do you want me to know because of this delay? This is good, probably. And you have work you're doing. Sometimes I'm praying, God, convict John, because thank God we have another week to convict him. Terrible, but then he convicts me in the process. I'm like, wait a minute, I wasn't thinking that. The other one I love to tell myself often is, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And it's always better together. It's always better. And I use past experiences of us rewriting Church 101 together, writing leader teams together, writing the first one, Joy Field together, it's always better together. I mean, I would not have written those books without y'all. It would have been terrible. So that helps me remember to stay in it with you. Also, when we are at peace, when John and I are at peace, and Kent too, when we have trust, everything gets done easier. Everything, it's like on speed dial, and we just get things done. Whereas when we're not at peace, these things are exhausting and take time. And so I really have that hope too, that, you know what, we're going to get to writing. And when we do, it's going to go like that, because our hearts are going to be united. We're going to have trust with each other. We're not going to be sabotaging each other, because we're united in our heart. And so that hope is there for me as well. That helps me stay in it.
To use brain science language, our relational circuits are on, and when they're off, it's hard to get anything back, right? And so that's got to be the starting place. One other comment, Tony, on what you said, go back to marriage. I think it was John Gottman who talks about rupture and repair in any marriage, or really any relationship. And he said the definition of a really healthy marriage is not that you never have any ruptures. That's just almost not possible, but it's your capacity to repair the ruptures that really is the mark of a healthy relationship, maturity. I think it's true in marriage. I think it's also true in leadership as well.
It's beautiful. And the last thing that I had noted on my paper that I think is important to say for me in this process is, we all three have to be willing to do our own work, to look at ourselves, to say, God, how do I protect John and Tony, if I'm Kent, from my weaknesses as a 9? How do I protect Luke 10 from my weaknesses? And John has to say the same thing about the 8, and I have to say the same thing about the 3. And, I think that is, I'm learning right now through this 2-month conversation for me. I'm going, you know what, if I am constantly wanting people to look at my benefits as a 3 and my value as a 3, then I'm not doing my work, because it's not y'all's job to see me and see the value I bring, although you do, and I love that. But it's my job, one, to let Jesus see me and be proud of me and be happy with Jesus. So find my peace with him, that he can see me even when y'all don't. And God, what are my weaknesses, and how do I protect y'all from them? That's my work. Y'all can't do that work for me. And if I don't do that work, I'm going to sabotage and destroy this relationship too. And so that's been huge for me. Last year I started that with our teams, because I realized there's 2 ways my weaknesses will come. And one is I rush my teams and I push them too hard and too fast. So last year started asking them for feedback on, am I pushing you too hard and too fast every meeting, just to try to protect them from me. And then God revealed last month the second one with you guys, and that's hiding my emotions and not showing up with them. And I was like, oh man, now I got to work on that one too. So thank you very much. My 2 biggest weaknesses as a 3 are just being drawn out in community and given so much opportunity.
So good. Something you said there, Tony, a little earlier that sparked a thought that I think might be helpful to say broadly. I think Scott Peck maybe was the one who originally talked about communities forming initially at the pseudo level. We put our best personhood forward, and a lot of organizations never get past pseudo, in my experience, until they blow up. They kind of rock along, letting other people see only the things they think are acceptable. And, that distance from reality ultimately comes back to bite them in a big way. But if they do start getting real, then you start getting into the chaos. You get into the conflict and the chaos. What some authors talk about is the storming
The
stage.
storming,
Yeah,
storming.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, and then the chaos, it's terrifying because you don't know what's going to happen here. It could blow up, and a lot of times, in my experience, it does blow up. And people just don't have the maturity, the breadth of perspective to keep the relationship bigger than the issues that are surfacing. But if you get deep enough into chaos, you ultimately come to emptiness, where you realize, in Peck's typology there, that I cannot change this other person. I can't make this reality different than it is. I have to let go of my demands for this thing to look like I expected it to look. And at that point, if we're still together in the emptiness stage, then there's a possibility for us to really begin to see and hear one another as we actually are, and then move into true community, where we're working and walking alongside of each other as we truly are. And of course, it would be wonderful if that just happened once, right? And then you're there, you're good. But
I was about to say, how many times does this have to go?
Our experience is that process just keeps rolling, right?
It's a spiral. Is that what you're saying?
On rolling. We get to keep rocking on down the road as we become more and more aware of how we're different and how we see things through different lenses. But so back to our conversation yesterday, Tony, I think when we're operating in a divine governance ecosystem where Jesus is Lord, not just in word, but in fact, so we will follow Jesus as we discern the leading of his Spirit together, that very un-American but very Christian calling that's at the center of our life in Christ. If we discern the leading of Jesus together, we will get done the things that Jesus is doing, because Jesus is Lord and Jesus is leading by his Spirit. I've seen lots of groups get lots of things done that had little to nothing to do with what Jesus was actually doing, because they weren't divinely governed. And so I think the ability to deal with conflict constructively is one of the most powerful and important subsets of what it is to have a whole ecosystem of God's grace that is operating in the beauty of the Spirit and in the differentiation of all those parts that God has called together to do the thing that God is doing here and now.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you guys for doing your work and helping me rewrite my history to some degree and rewire my brain for healthy attachment. So thank you.
Same for me. It's healing old wounds, old trauma.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're growing up into this thing that we've been invited into, which is amazing.
About time, Kent.
And still a journey.
All right. Well, we are down to 4 minutes, and Kent and I will jump on our other call. But for our closing round and listening round, if y'all are out there listening to this, if anyone was there, or you're hearing this on a recording later, just take a minute, take 30 seconds and listen. God, do I have community like this? Do I belong to leaders, other peers that can form community with me that would help me grow as a leader, as a person, as a human, as a parent, as a daughter? And if I don't have that, what do you want me to know about that? Because I'm sure he wants to put you in some type of community like that. And maybe you're out there going, wow, this is incredible, and I want to see this reproduced all over the planet. And you want to become a strategic partner with Luke 10 to help us do that. So please, if that's you, the website has our giving information there, and we would love to have you part of the team to fuel and fund this movement. 30 seconds, guys, and we'll let them listen, and we'll think about our closing round. What do we take away from our time today? All right. I think the weightiness of this conversation hits me, and it's our norm now for 10 years, but I can't escape right now realizing how far from normal it is for most people to have this this gift. So you know, our whenever we go to Luke 10 conferences, people are like, can you and John argue in front of us? And I'm like, no. Maybe one day we'll give you all a live demonstration. But people need to see it. They want to see it modeled. They want to see what this looks like and how this works. And so people haven't seen it, like you said, Kent. They don't have an imagination for it, haven't seen it, and so the weightiness of this is just on me, and I'm thankful again for you guys.
So for me, I feel like it's God's sense of humor. This has almost nothing to do with the thing we're talking about, but he's taking me back to the mid 1970s. So I'm a new evangelical Presbyterian pastor, very conservative church, Tony, that didn't believe that women should be elders.
Oh goodness!
And that was a hot.
Wow!
Right?
Wow!
So I feel like Jesus is sort of laughing at me now and saying, you know, you as an example, but I think there are many, many women in Luke 10 who are fully themselves, who lead just in the same way as any man would lead. And I just feel like the Lord is kind of smiling at where I was and where I am today.
Thank you. And that's so hard to believe, John, because you create so much space for women to lead. And I have grown so much as a leader because of you. So thanks for your prophetic spirit there coming out of that church for sure.
Aren't we glad that wisdom in the Proverbs is a woman guiding us along? Well, yeah, I feel so privileged to be a part of this community. I feel satisfied. I feel seen, heard, understood, celebrated, and I feel like I have companions on the journey. And that's good. When all that's there, it's good.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Love you guys. Kent and I are going to hang out here. John, you can if you want. Probably don't want to.
I'm leaving.
Bye for now.
All right. Thank you. Do you know who all is supposed to be in this meeting? I know Jay and Shannon Pasa. Oh, Sarah Harrington. All right.
I'm going to let you
Yes,
get our
go.
going. I'm going to take a quick break here. I'll be right back.
There we go. All right. We are going to take a 2-minute break, and we'll be right back. All right. Hello, hello.
Hi
Hi,
there.
Jay.
Hey, Jason, good to see you, friend.
You too.
Sarah. Is there anyone else I was supposed to invite? I invited
Hi.
Shane, Sarah, you.
I have your back. I think you may be able to Shan. Okay, Sarah has it. Great.
Good. Okay.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you. I remembered her after the fact.
Okay.
Hi, Sarah. And then Jay, are you up for facilitating today? Do you feel up to it? I know you've been sick. How are you feeling?
Yes, I think I could give a go at it.
All right. Awesome.
Thank you. Yes. Well, we'll let Sarah get on board.
Oh, do you want to do the intro? The intro to our live people.
I
You
don't
didn't
have
Okay.
have that at the ready. Do you have your?
I can totally
Okay.
do the intro while Sarah's coming on. All right. Welcome to Relational Revolution Live. We are here modeling and inviting. We are modeling our value shifts for practicing church as healthy heart-to-heart connection. And we're inviting others to join us by training and funding this global movement. You have joined us in our grant circle because we have been wanting to move as an organization into possibly coaching and consulting some churches or organizations that want to shift how their culture of their entire system is. And it could be a small church plant all the way up to a whole mission organization. So, but we're sensing that maybe consulting is on the horizon. And so we've been meeting to talk about what that could look like if we did that. And we're exploring possibly maybe applying for a Lilly Grant Foundation on the back end of the work that we're doing right now. Does that sound like a good summary of where we are?
Beautiful.
We've been using divine governance. So if you don't know what that is, there's a meeting yesterday with Kent Smith that'll probably be on replay at some point or on a podcast on my podcast on Thursday. So it'll drop on Thursday. You can hear divine governance there. And we'll share a little bit about that in our agenda, but I think that's it for the intro of what this is and what we're doing.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you, friends, for gathering again for our penultimate meeting. I think there's one more after this. So let's see what we can put together. Well, we'll begin with our appreciation stories as a way.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Hillary says stop streaming, but don't end the meeting or leave Zoom. Keep your Zoom call on and add participants and then turn live stream back on. Do I really have to do that, Hillary? She's probably watching me right now. I will if I absolutely have to. I probably do. She's writing me. I'm so sorry, y'all. This is the first time I've had a back-to-back call like this, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do.
Well, do you think we could take?
Okay. She says no, I don't have to. Okay, great.
Okay, so you're good. Okay.
Thank you, Hillary.
You're off the hook. Well, let's take just a few moments to gather some appreciation moments, and then we'll just come back in, about 30, 45 seconds. Does that sound good? All right. All right, so we'll give maybe Tony and Kent just a few extra breaths and shrugs and shoulder rolls as they may need, because they're coming off that other call. Sarah may be the freshest. I don't know. Would you wanna go first?
Yes, I can go first. I think I had shared with you guys back in March that my husband and I weren't able to go away on our anniversary weekend because our youngest son was injured and required surgery. But we were able to go away last weekend, which was just a beautiful blessing. And we stayed at an Airbnb on Flathead Lake, which I think it might be the largest natural freshwater lake west of the Mississippi that's here in Montana. And Saturday morning we got up and we went for a walk, and the road just curved around the lake back there. I think there's like a Lutheran camp is back there. And we were just walking along the road, and we looked down this driveway that was nearby, and this little dog, I don't know, it was probably like this big, just so furry, but its legs were maybe this long, just came tearing down the driveway toward us. And we just like stopped, and we weren't quite sure what it was going to do when it finally got to us. And it was just so happy to see us. And it was just wiggling and whimpering and whining. And we just patted it for maybe 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And we're like, oh, I hope it goes back home and doesn't follow us. And it didn't. It just like turned around, and it just, as fast as it had run down to us, it ran all the way back home, just like that. And it was just this expression of joy that it didn't cost that dog anything to come and say hello to us and share the joy. And it got so much joy from being with us, even though it didn't even know us. And just as it ran back home, we were just reflecting on like, why don't we as people do that more? Just share this abounding joy with others. It doesn't cost us anything. And it multiplies it back to us when we do that. And so we just felt so warm inside. And I mean, even right now, just sharing it, my cheeks feel the smile on my face. And that's my appreciation story that I wanted to share.
That is so amazing. I love your nature appreciation stories that you give, Sarah. They're often and very rewarding. Thank you for taking us there. If you were to give a name to that dog, could you come up with a name?
Oh, Furball or Puppy. I mean, it was like one of those dogs. I think it might have been a mini Aussie, but it looked like a puppy because it was just so furry.
I love it. Could be our Luke 10 mascot.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. Mine's a little bit of a nature appreciation by way of a lightning bolt. And so I had the privilege of recording a podcast live, the Relational Revolution podcast based on this book with Chad Waller. And we did that today. And toward the end, very much toward the end, there was a lightning bolt that came and shut off my power. A whole house, and actually a good distance down the way, even Chad's house. So we lost power and everything went offline, I think, for a while. But I think maybe he stayed on somehow and Hillary took over. So that was quite the reaction from heaven, perhaps. I don't know. It just happened. So it made me laugh. And then after I took a walk around, I couldn't get back online. I connected with Chad to debrief briefly our call. And even before we got to that, he was so effusive with high octane joy. He says, before we debrief it, I just got to let you know about my training call with Ryan Nienaber. I had an intro call, and Jason, I can't wait till you watch the video because this happened. And how do you do these things, you people? And he was prepared before the call. He was listening to Jesus, and we connected before we even connected. And it was just so amazing. And there was mutual weeping, and we bonded. And he goes, I don't care if I ever even do the intro call, ever. This was worth it. This moment in my life. I'll never forget hearing Chad's voice through the phone. It filled me with a lightning bolt, with thunder, with electricity of this bliss that we're carrying in this relational revolution. Amen.
So good.
Yeah. Tony or Kent, how about you?
Go for it, sister.
All right. First of all, we do not have another meeting after this. So if we have to go a little long today, we can, those of us who can, because we might need to for some work. Just throwing that out there. Your Sarah reminded me of this morning. I'm going to go back to this morning because I tend to live at high octane joy all the time. Like y'all see me and I'm like all on and I'm so joyful. And this morning was my quiet. So joy has to be balanced with quiet, right? Or I get burnt out. And this morning when I woke up and got rid of my kids to school, I was sitting on my porch outside, and my coach, I have a coach right now, has told me I must drink a hot beverage in my hands very, very slowly out in nature, and I can't do anything while I'm doing it. So that's like my job right now, is to slow down and quiet myself, because I do go nonstop. So I was being a good student and I was doing that, or a good trainee, whatever. And I'm sitting outside, and I was doing some just internal spending time with myself. And I just, just connecting with different parts of me and realizing how much I love nature and how much I feed off of just the birds and being outdoors. It really feeds me, and I don't do it enough. I sit here in my office all day, even though I see nature, I'm not in it, and I need to feel it. It's very physical. So just even acknowledging that about me was fun. I felt seen by God and myself. I felt quieted and rejuvenated, almost like I was, by the end of my 20 minutes or 30 minutes of just sitting there being with myself and God, I did feel restored, and like I could return to joy instead of just needing to pull back and withdraw and be quiet. And I can carry that little quiet with me kind of all day so you brought me there with your story, Sarah. I was taken to my quiet today, and that soothes me and makes me not so tired. So I really enjoyed that and thankful for that.
Mm. Thank you, Tony. I love the customized way that God loves us, each one. And yesterday, or Sunday, I guess, I was talking with my dad. He's 91 this year. We lost Mother this last fall. And so Dad's been in a more tender place than I've ever known him to be in general. And he's feeling some of the limitations that age brings. One of those things is his hearing is getting pretty bad, especially in his right ear, which has normally been his better ear. His left ear, I think, is pretty much just not working much at all. And so he had been very hopeful that he was going to have a chance this week to do some video recording of some stories that he's really wanted to capture for posterity and just to bless people. And but he lost his hearing aid like 4 days prior to this day, and he'd looked everywhere. I mean, he had taken the house apart, top to bottom, right and left, and just could not find it. And he got word from his videographer that she was coming over and she was going to be there in just a few minutes. And Dad said he had looked everywhere, and he was really feeling sad because the range of her voice is exactly in the middle of that spectrum that he cannot hear at all. So all he can see is her lips move without the hearing aid. So he said, Lord, I need some help here. And it occurred to him to look down to his right between the bed and the nightstand, and there was his hearing aid. So he picked it up, and but the thing that I loved about it was he said, God's like that. He just so often gives us these little things that are absolutely customized to where we are and what we need. He hears us and he sees us. And that story has been blessing me all week since I heard it. I love it that's what our God is like. The God of love is a God who knows the hairs on our head, sees the sparrows, every one of them, and knows when we lose our hearing aid, and is willing to help us find it. So anyway, that's my appreciation story today.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so precious. Well, we do have a healthy agenda set before us for our Grand Circle. For those watching the recording, there are some others that have been part of this Grand Circle. And so they are also Stephen Johnson, who, when he sees this, we're saying hello to Stephen, and Shannon DeBryan has spent some time on the circle too. So we're grateful for those other members as well. The agenda for everyone, give me a thumbs up if you've accessed it. If you don't, I can share the link.
Could you send the link?
be happy to. All
You want me
right.
to do it, Jay, or you got it?
I think I have it right here. Thank you. Okay. Everyone should have that. Okay. If not, just let me know. Super. All right. Just looking through the agenda, I'll just read through it and then we'll see if everyone's on board for this. We're going to review the proposal shaping process within Divine Governance. And there's a doc there, an attachment that Kent brought to us, and maybe he can open that. And when we get to that, if he's willing, he can give us a review of that, Kent, if you'd like. And our goal for today is to draft something that we can submit to the mission circle. It's going to go from this grant circle to the mission circle for consent to develop into a full grant proposal for Lilly Foundation's Thriving Congregations Initiative. And so we have that doc attached there. That looks like some of the work before us. Question to consider: do we have a relationship to a Christian denomination or tradition?
They asked that in the foundation grant. So there you go.
Nice. There's a thought and an inquiry of possible collaboration with the Eden Center. And there's also a proposal to send the following email that is also there that we can review together, and then reviewing next steps from there. How's that sound? And is there anything else we'd like to add? Anyone? Okay, that might take the balance of the call. Kent, would you be
I
willing
can
to
share, just because I don't know if other people share if it goes up on the
Oh yeah,
thing. So let me share, and Kent, you can explain.
yes, you can show Tony and he can tell.
So we operate in Luke 10 on a process that we call Divine Governance, which includes as a big part of its operational system what's called sociocracy or dynamic governance. One of the key things that we do as we discern together what the Lord is leading us to do is work through proposals. And so this group has been, as Jason was saying, has been working on developing a proposal, specific proposal for the Lilly Foundation around a grant application. And so anytime that we're working on a proposal and we're doing it with the Lord as a team or as a community, we have kind of four major phases that we walk through. So there's initially a picture forming. And in the first phase of picture forming, what we're really wanting to do is unravel all those strands of yarn that make up this ball of question that we have. And so picture forming on the document that you're showing us there, Tony, can you make that just a little bigger maybe so that our viewers can?
Yeah, my screen is so messed up. I'm gonna try to expand it here, and then maybe
yeah, maybe down, there you go. That's better. Yep. So so picture forming is in the left column there. That's where we began. And what we do is we take a little bit of time, as you've probably observed in a number of the calls this week, where we're just saying, Lord, what would you want us to be paying attention to here? And what we want to include in this stage around whatever the question is our ideal solution would include. So as we're thinking specifically about the grant, what would an optimal grant proposal look like? What would be the elements of that, or the strands of yarn? Sometimes we use the ball of yarn metaphor. What would be the strands that we would want to be sure get addressed in our solution? So we take a little time to listen to the Lord, and then we share with each other. And it's just kind of a spirit storming process where each person in the team gets a chance to include elements of what they would call an important element of the ideal solution. When we have those collected, and we may do several rounds before it's all over, usually we do rounds and then we'll do kind of popcorn, anything else that's come up for anybody that they would want to add. And when we feel like that's complete, then we move to the proposal shaping stage of developing a proposal, which is To get to those outcomes, we might, and again, we're going to make space to pause with the Lord and see what comes to mind. And so we collect those thoughts, perceptions, insights, and develop a list of possibilities. At this stage, we're not trying to critique. We're not trying to figure out how they mash up together or if they are even compatible. We're just putting things down. When we feel like that list is complete, here's some things that we might do. Then we move to the actual drafting the proposal. Sometimes that happens in the same meeting, depending on time. Sometimes the group will assign a subgroup to do some proposal shaping of the ideas that have been surfaced in that second phase, and then come to the group and have a proposal draft for us. So again, we look at that together and we try to see what else we might want to do to refine or hone that, and then move to what we call a consent round, where we hopefully are able to reach a consent as a group on the proposal that has been drafted for the group. There's more bits to the final consent round, especially in case someone has what we call a paramount objection. We won't go into that right now necessarily, but that's the basic process that we've been walking through. So the things that you'll be looking at are our responses to those three big categories.
Thank you. You're such a trusty guide to bring us through the process. Just hearing you again is just putting the pieces together in a more solid fashion for me. So thank you for taking us there. Quick question for Tony. Can we confirm we are recording this for the other people? Do you have that on your end being recorded?
Yeah, the live stream records it.
Okay.
So I can download it. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Sure. Well, great. Well, our next item is our goal for today. And again, the goal is to draft something that we can submit to the Mission Circle so that they can look at it, hopefully consent it as Jesus leads, and that will develop into that fully shaped proposal. So we can open up that document if you have that. And I don't know if you want to share that, Tony.
I can. And part of the question is that our goal for the day? I mean, we can try to do that, but we might end and go, no, we need another week on this, right? So I don't know how much we want to have done before we submit it to the Mission Circle. So I think, Kent, we'll need your weigh in on how formed do we want it before we give it to the Mission Circle, because we'll definitely have to shape it into a Lilly grant proposal once the Mission Circle says, yeah, I think this is a good idea to form, and then we can put the effort into forming it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So I can make the text bigger here. I might actually, let me share it on a different screen, because for whatever reason, this screen is messed up on my computer. So if I share it from here, I'll be able to make it full screen. All right. And I'll make it bigger too. We'll go. See, is 125 good, or should we do 150? Y'all let me know once it gets there. Is that big enough, or do we need it bigger?
I think that's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Any proposals for how to do this work of walking through the proposals? Some things were not touched or changed. Some things were. Some people made comments. Any proposals for how we should, a best way to do this?
Well, I think since there's some people who are stepping into this that have not been in the conversation, it would be helpful just to read through the proposal as it's been shaped so far, and then we can maybe have some reaction rounds and kind of take it from there.
Sounds good.
Great.
So just a straight through reading and then comments after is maybe best.
Or each section, I think.
Maybe section by section would be good, where we have the detail in front of us a little bit.
Yeah. Tony, would you start with the desired outcome and everyone just take a section and we'll just kind of free flow with comments?
Yeah. So this was our desired outcome based off our listening time of several weeks ago. As I read through this, I realized today that we definitely need to do more listening around things like what changes does Luke 10 hope to see? I've got it over, there we go. What changes does Luke 10 hope to see if this were successful? So more outcomes, more brainstorming about what exactly the outcomes are for the people engaging, not just for Luke 10, and for organizations we might collaborate with. And then do we need this before we submit to the mission circle? So that's the big question, is do we need to do more listening on that before we submit it, or is this good enough for now? So that, keep that in your mind as we go through this. All right. So one desired outcome for us was to provide consultants who share a broad framework for kingdom transformation, who are able to come alongside Luke 10 people, regardless of their wineskins, meaning regardless of their church expression, I think, to help them assess their current congregation, which we define very broadly as a collective of vibrant families of Jesus, gain clarity around the cultural transformation necessary, and implement appropriate steps to move the community closer to the desired culture. So that is so far our desired outcome. Questions, comments, thoughts about that?
So would you say a little bit more, Tony, about your sidebar comment there? I think that's important. So it sounds like you're feeling like that what we have there is more internal to Luke 10, what we hope to see accomplished, and you're wondering if there's some other measures we might want to include at that point. Is that right?
Right, because our evaluation, what's the word I'm looking for? What we measure is going to be based off the outcomes that we want to see happen. So yes, we want to provide consultants, but like, why? What's the real outcome? And I think our real outcome is to give clarity, support, implementation coaching to people searching, whatever, right? So I think, yes, this is internal, what we're wanting to do, but what's the real outcome that we're going after? And the real outcome is transformed communities, right? Like, we want to see communities living out their values consistent with who they are, and changing the world through that, right? So I think some of those would be helpful, because as we look to measuring, we're going to need to directly measure some of those things, not providing consultants. Okay, well, we have 10 consultants and we're providing them. You can't really measure that, right? I mean, you can, but it's not. That really doesn't mean the world is changing just because we provide consultants. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think at some level, this, like everything we do, comes back to our core aim, our great vision statement of seeing a vibrant family of Jesus in close reach of everyone worldwide, right? That's why Luke 10 exists, is to carry that out. In our mission statement, which is to equip, connect, and equip, right? Spiritual moms and dads or spiritual leaders for this mushrooming, growing revolution. Somehow those ideas dovetail, I think, perfectly and beautifully with this, but that's not explicit in anything we say there for sure.
Yeah.
Tony, when I was reviewing it, it was actually farther down in this section that says, how will we track performance indicators and what quantitative and qualitative methods will we use in the evaluation process? So it sounds like you're kind of asking that same question. Some of the things that just came to me were having a survey at the beginning, when someone comes for consulting, having them do a self-evaluation of their congregation, regarding, how is the current state of their heart-to-heart connections within their congregations and with God? How skilled are they with others-centered gentle curiosity? What is their current level of joy with celebration and play and appreciation? And how high is their resilience in hardship, that sticky love? So it seems like those are kind of the elements of transformation within the culture that that's not exclusive, but they are key elements that can be measured.
Yes.
Does that kind of answering some of that question?
Yeah. That's exactly where I have qualitative on there. You could use surveys or interviews, right? Before and after assessment. So what you're doing is kind of drawing that out and seeing kind of the questions we could ask or the things we could measure. So that's beautiful. Yes. So that work would go right into the qualitative thing that we're measuring. The quantitative, we're probably a little more shaky on at this point. And I think that's directly tied to the fact that we don't have necessarily very clear outcomes stated, right? Because if our outcome is to provide coaches or consultants, well, then we could say, well, we want to have 3 consultants trained by a certain time. Well, that's great. But is the outcome that we want to train so many congregations or so many cell churches, or not cell churches, vibrant collectives of vibrant families of Jesus? Like, what are we really going after, right? And how many do we want to go after? And maybe we really can't say that, but we can try to think through some of what those could be once we get real clear on the outcomes.
Right. And that could be part of like what you were talking about, Kent, with the duplication of the vibrant families. So is there a way to measure the quantity of generations or families that are being duplicated?
Yeah.
So that could be a quantitative.
What you have up there, spontaneous generational duplication, that could be an outcome that we're
Mhm.
going after, not necessarily the indicator, but the outcome. And then the indicator would be, 10 of their leaders were trained as facilitators, right? Or 4 of their core leadership team was trained as facilitators and are now facilitating a healthy community, right?
Mhm.
So that would be an indicator that generational duplication is happening. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a great outcome. I think if we're going to listen on outcomes at some point, I think that's a great outcome to think about. My biggest question, I guess, for Kent is, Kent, do you think we need to listen on that before we submit this to the mission circle, or do you think we might be able to submit it to the mission circle as is and then listen more on that when we're actually developing the grant proposal?
I think the shaped proposal as it stands, obviously it's not in final form, and then with the comments that we've got in the sidebars there from various people on the team is a great place to be passing it along to the mission circle that's ultimately going to need to consent, because there's a lot of work that's been done that gives that group something to sink their teeth into, but it's not in final form. So there's room for further formation there, which I think is a really wise way to go.
Right. So does that sound good that we'll just hold that stuff until we hear back from the mission circle? And then when we start on the actual grant forming, if we get that far, then we'll do more listening on that.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Consent, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. We're ready to move on.
And then we'll see what kind of feedback they even offer us. I'm sure it'll be top notch. Sarah, would you want to pick up on the brainstorm of ideas?
Yes. Overarching offering, custom coaching consulting based on a shared Luke 10 broad framework. Luke 10 needs to create or adopt and educate ourselves with a shared broad framework for kingdom culture transformation. This would allow us to be able to offer consulting, custom training using a common shared set of tools for communities to discern where they are and what tool in what moment would be the best for helping them move to the next step. Should I keep going?
Yeah, I think
All
we
right.
all.
Strands involved in preparing for this kind of coaching or consulting. Stage 1, preparation. Timeline could take a year. Stage 2 can begin before this one ends. Increasing Luke 10's capacity. Luke 10 will need to train more trainers to train facilitators and trainers in order to free Jason to give his time to coaching and consulting. Discerning the needs of our Luke 10 people and their congregations, which could look like listening to the needs of our facilitators, listening to the needs of our leader team members, listening to the needs of organizations connected to our members.
Like Eden Center, just throwing the And we have started to do this with our survey, but I see that we need to dig into that a little bit more. Maybe interview some of those people and really interview Stephen Johnson, who we've done this with already, more, right? Milk all that for what it's worth.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then also training our consultants and coaches. Coaches need to shore up their training. And some of that could look like agree on shared broad framework. What is this framework that we're working toward? Thrive training, Emmanuel training, divine governance, general coaching, training skills, and regenerative culture training. And I did have a question about that. Is that what you do, Kent? Is that
Yes.
your, okay. That's what I thought, but I wasn't positive that was the name of it.
Beautiful. All right. Any thoughts on that section then? Stage 1 of just preparation and getting ourselves up to capacity to be able to do this well. I have noticed not many of you have added things to any of this stuff, so feel free if you have other ideas.
Yeah, I had added one, but then I deleted it because you kind of do cover it in the end, but it's under the sustainability section where you talk about how will other resources, for instance, intellectual capital, commitment, or existing staff, time, capacity building, et cetera, be secured and deployed to sustain the momentum of the program into the future. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question, about that was how might pulling Jason off of training impact, and not just pulling Jason off, but how might that impact the current work that you're already doing, and how might that add a workload to your staff? So kind of that preparation part. See if I can, because it's kind of under preparation, but it's also sustainability in my mind. I guess I kind of link the two of them.
Yeah, I think that's great. Great connection, Sarah, because the preparation we do is so that it will be sustainable. And so training more trainers who are training trainers, because that's what Jay does right now. It used to be what I did, was train trainers. Now Jay trains trainers so that he freed me up to do a lot of other things. So when we train someone else to train trainers, that will free him up. It doesn't mean he won't ever train. I still train, but I'm not overseeing that like Jay is now. So I think that will free him up, and he can still train, he can still touch base with it, but it's not his full-time job. It's not like it occupies, not that he does that full-time right now anyway. So being able to employ him full-time will be huge, because he's not right now. We have no one paid full-time to do any of this. So when we hand training over to a collective of trainers, for example, that we almost have in place now, and then Jay gets paid to do consulting, that's just going to give him extra time to work. So he'll still be able to do some of that, but not all of it. And hopefully the way we fund our consulting will move in to start funding Jay, if that makes sense, once the 5 years is over, and we can get into that when we develop the financials, which we haven't even looked at. So
would this increase of workload affect more than just the trainers?
Yeah, it will. It will. You always give about a 10% and 10% from the total grant you collect for the whole organism, because it always affects everyone. Our finances will be affected. Maybe people will start giving more. We'll have to track more. We'll have to track. We'll have to track all of that. So finances will be affected. Communication will be affected, because they're going to have to communicate about all of this. So the grant money gives money to the organism for the extra work that's on the whole system. That makes sense, which allows us to hire more people if we need to, and to be able to fill those capacities or hire them for more time if we need to.
So then that might be something to add if it's not necessarily facilitators or trainers, but behind the scenes communication people to handle that increase of coordination.
Yes. Yeah. There's going to be several things in here. Good. Thank you. We really do need a finance person like this, just over finances. I'm just going to put finance person. Probably more comms help. Great. more help with communication.
And would R&D be responsible for some of the materials, or would that be to the consulting circle? Would it be a mixture?
It's a great question on kind of once we get into the nitty-gritty of this, how it will function. And I don't know if we need to talk about that right now. I think that's probably a whole system conversation.
Yeah. Well, however we do it, we want to be sure that the consulting we're doing is linking directly to the overall purposes of Luke 10. And so there'll need to be close coordination at the least, for sure. Thinking about how operationally there are lots of nuts and bolts, as you all have been discussing, but there's also just the whole the DNA of what God has given us in Luke 10 that is meant to be its specific gift. And so thinking about how we come alongside others, join them in what God is doing there, and impart the things that God has given us while continuing to be learners ourselves and how to help others. I think that's a big project that looks like, an over a period of time process, right? We're not going to do this in a year or 2 years, 3 years. It will need to be something that is attended to over the longer haul, but it's broadly the invitation to open our arms wider, right? To share what we have been given.
Yeah. Just structurally, we've got our equipping circle, right? And our equipping circle right now oversees the R&D team as well as the trainer circle. The way we have prepared for growth is that the equipping circle will birth a consulting circle. And that consulting circle can be in charge of their own materials as well. So if they want to lead on the things that we have on this document, they would be able to, and the equipping circle would oversee that.
Sure.
So that's the way it's structured currently to function. If that helps a little bit.
So again, for people who are watching, we're organized sociocratically in this respect, that circles are connected to other circles and double connected in many cases. And so there's a way to make sure that the flow of information is both going from the center of the organism out to the enacting elements of it, in this case, the enactment of consulting, and then that information is flowing back through the equipping circle to the general circle, and ultimately the mission circle serves as a guidance center for all of that.
I can see the future multiplication of the steward, scribes, and delegates. There're just going to be so many.
Yeah.
Did we leave off on stage 2 somewhere?
I think we are ready. I think we're ready to go on.
Okay.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. Where does one get this? Yep. Kent does that. And that would be Eden Center. So that would be our partnership with Eden. So one of the ways we would partner with Eden Center. There could be so many more.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah, especially as we get into the, how do we want to assess or evaluate health? That's an area that we've been working on for a while. So love the kind of co-discover what that might look like.
Right. Stage 2.
I can pick up there. Stage 2, resource development / workshop conation. Timeline core work during years 2 and 3, although these can begin being developed during stage 1 and continue on during stage 3. Development of requested resources or tools needed to support local implementation, used to either get people ready for consulting or for use during their consulting. Some of the bullet points here are books on 5 core values, a local Church 101 workshop that Luke 10 facilitators or trainers could offer their communities, a short video introducing checking in and listening and its benefits, a book study on Luke 10's values expounding on relational revolution, possibly a pre-Church 101 activity, training and cultural transformation around the elements of story and system and all the tools under each one of these ideas. A prayer group for local 10-to-be answers, and recorded stories of where this is working in those contexts. Any reactions to any of those, or additions or questions?
I think it pretty much covered a lot of the requests that people shared in their survey.
Yeah, that survey was so helpful. Continuing then, Kent, would you pick up stage 3, please?
Sure.
Sorry.
So stage 3, implementation, timeline, experimenting with this will begin in stage 1, but seeing this fully operational in years 2 and 3. Ideas of different levels of consulting possible, or complete package option. So an introductory coaching call to assess fit and need. And I'm assuming what we mean there is the fit between what Luke 10 has to offer and what the need is in the context, right?
Yep. Beautiful.
Yep. The consultant then consults with other consultants and proposes a pathway forward, a custom plan and or a complete package approach. And under the complete package or custom package could include any of the following. C101 if they have not yet done that, or they would like to get their team up to speed. Leader team if they have not yet joined one, or they would like to form one with their leadership team. Facilitator training if they have not yet done that, or if they want to get their team up to speed. And then weekly personal coaching or consulting sessions with a Luke 10 consultant. 2, explore and understand how our cultural context has shifted to need a more relationally based understanding of church, gain greater clarity around the values and practices that will help them become more relational and help them adapt their ministries to help implement these values and practices at all levels of their life and ministry. Then monthly group coaching sessions with Kent Smith, John White, and or Tony, and others who are receiving consulting, so they can hear other stories and learn from each other. So this would be a group that is gathered of other groups that are also receiving consulting services from us, right?
Right. So I would see like a 1 call a month, and
Mhm.
either John and myself show up, or you and John show up, or me and John show up. So it doesn't have to be even the same people each month,
Yeah.
but that they get a high touch with us, I think is probably the seller there to some degree.
Sure. And a custom on-site training that will help this local community laser focus their training for their specific need, removing all bottlenecks and laying a strong foundation for the local body to increase skill level and access their internal resources with Emmanuel and each other to continue on their own. Maybe more than one will be necessary. So essentially, you're outlining there a process of connecting with a local group and constructing, in light of who they are and where they are, a solution for the transformation of their context that's drawing on the wealth of resources that Luke 10 has, and in light of their opportunities and constraints.
Yes. Yeah. And just to put skin on this, if we're thinking of Matt and Dedham, for example, he did a introductory coaching call with Stephen. Stephen at first contacted him mainly for personal coaching. So at the beginning, he didn't know he was going to take this to his whole church. He just needed some personal coaching. So Matt was like, I can do personal coaching with you. And so he did. And I don't know if it was about 6 months into that, because included in Matt's personal coaching is Church 101 with people. And maybe even inviting them to a leader team, right? Because that's how all of our leaders, we feel like need those skills to grow. So Stephen does that. And of course, in that process, realizes he wants to take that to his own family, does that for another 6 months. And then about a year in to this pastor reviving his own life and family, he realizes my whole church needs this. So that's when Matt begins to then meet weekly with him for this coaching, right? This kind of coaching package of how do we implement this in your church? And of course, it involved doing Church 101 in their church, building leader teams in their church, right? And each group's going to want to do that differently, probably, and uniquely. Again, we don't have a cookie cutter for how churches even do this. They call it different things. They did it very differently. Everybody's going to do it differently, right? And then it ended up being us going there, doing retreats locally with them. We lived there for 3 months, actually, but and, he was a part of a leader team the whole time, formed leader teams with his whole congregation, had that support from others, was in a movement team with John White at the time as well. So had that kind of monthly coaching that was going on with others. So we pretty much did this with Stephen, but of course it's custom because you're not just rolling out some program, you're listening to the need and you're bringing the tool for the need at the time. And then you continue on the next tool, the next need. Does that make sense? Kind of how that flows?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think assessing is probably the biggest skill that our consultants are going to have to make sure they have, right? Is the ability to listen and to assess.
Sounds a lot like Jesus. He didn't do much just in case teaching. He did just in time teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Well, if we're ready for stage 4, Sarah, can you bring us through that?
Stage 4, evaluation ongoing at every stage. Clarify outcomes, which we went over above there. Clarifying performance indicators based on those outcomes. For instance, quantitative. How many trainings do we hope to host? How many congregations are participating? Qualitative. Could use surveys or interviews before and after each training segment to assess deepened sense of heart-to-heart connection expressed by participants, deepened understanding among congregations of their changing social and cultural contexts, descriptions of their clarified mission, vision, values, and practices as a congregation or collective of vibrant families of Jesus, and deepened individual and collective spirituality. How will we track performance indicators? What quantitative or qualitative methods will we use in the evaluation process? Who is responsible for evaluation? Tony would love to talk more with Scott Harris and Mission Increase to see how they measured their success.
Matt and Eden have done good work as well. Right. Mission Increase, just quickly, I think that's what they're called, but Scott Harris is local here and he does Mission Increase. Really, they are a coaching service for free that they offer themselves to nonprofits to help nonprofits get healthy relationally and organizationally and financially. And so they do a ton of training and work all for free for these organizations. So it's incredible what they're doing. They get funding from churches to do it. So that's even interesting how that model is. But I definitely see some parallels between what they're doing and what we're wanting to do. They're just doing it in a very institutional, right, paradigm where you have parachurch and you have church, and they're in parachurch, which of course we don't even use those words. We live in a very different world. But that's who Scott Harris is.
Good.
So most of this is work we haven't listened on yet that I'm like throwing out, we need to talk about, we need to listen on. These are still things that we have yet to really listen around and discuss, but I want to make sure we don't forget these elements. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you want to bring us through those elements, Tony?
Okay. Ideas on how we fund this. Well, this one we have talked a little bit about. The basic idea here, I don't have to read it word for word, is that, we do charge, the value will depend on whatever package we put together, right? Because some things we can have, like this training costs this much if we're doing a Church 101 local training. Like we can put value to those things, just like we have value to facilitator training, trainer training, all of that, right? Church 101 leader teams. So we can have values on certain things that we offer, but if we're putting together a package for a church, that value is going to be unique to whatever we're offering, right? So the consultant would come up with the value of that package, would share that value just like we always do. And we're hoping that that it would be a sliding scale sort of thing, that if the organization can pay, wonderful, they pay. We do charge a little upgraded charge so that maybe when they pay, it can supplement or give some scholarship funding to people who can't pay. So we'd like to work out something like that to underride some of the other families that can't afford to pay for this level of attention. So that's the way it would kind of work: sliding scale, subsidized by some organizations that can pay full on. As you can see, there's lots of things we could talk about around that as well. Luke 10 would probably need to work to raise scholarships for that as well. It would be one of our funding things. We can also encourage potential clients to go get grant funding for this development work, because the way Matt got paid to do this with Stephen was actually Stephen went for a Lilly grant funding for his personal development as a senior pastor, and got grant funding. And so he used that to pay Matt. So there is funding out there for some churches who are doing this type of work. Any more thoughts? If you have more thoughts, we can add them here. That's all all we had already talked about or worked through in the other proposal.
It's so helpful. Thank you. Is there anything else on this document?
Yes. Kent, did you have anything you wanted to say about that though?
Looks good. Looks
Okay.
good.
Great. Other threads still to consider. And I'll just read the bold. Okay. Who are our consultants? How do we decide who becomes these consultants, right? What kind of training do they need? Which we talk a little bit about up above, but that demands another conversation. How do we find 10-2B answers or interested people? How will we communicate the proposed program to potential participants or the general public or funders, right? And then some ideas there about how, we obviously pray 10-2B because that's what we do. We share it with our listed facilitators and our leader team members. We could host consultancy interest calls, like we were talking about, these coaching calls to find out if the fit and the need is there. Through listening and discerning, maybe even someone who's just off the internet can say, I'd like coaching and consulting, and they're not in our current process, but they get in one of those calls and we can discern with them, okay, your next step's Church 101, but they come in the door of consultancy first. So even that is an option of where yeah. Prerequisites for consulting with them. That's something we're going to want to talk through. I just wrote, they have already, or they're willing to train. I think Johnny, Kent, and I are pretty adamant about that being a prerequisite. Yeah. Sustainability. And then there's ideas, more questions and ideas, questions to work through on sustainability. And then we need a line item budget, a budget narrative. And then here's budgeting help when we get there. And that's it.
Great work, buddy.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that is a shaped proposal, Tony. Thank you for taking so many threads that have been gathered in the earlier two columns and pulling all that together for us. That's super helpful.
Welcome.
Well, next, what we had left on our agenda, if you have that open still, were the possible questions to consider that Tony had jotted down about a relationship with a Christian denomination or tradition, and possible collaboration with the Eden Center, and then reviewing this email to the Lilly Foundation.
Maybe those are mission questions, Kent. Should we take those to the mission circle? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Great. I'll add those to that agenda. Thank you.
Mhm.
And is that including the reviewing the email, or is that our work?
No, we can do the email. I want to hear y'all's reaction to that and see if I can send it off today.
Yeah. Would you like to open it and share it with us?
Okay. Yes. Let me.
Well, that's everything right there.
It's just right there. Yeah. It's the text of it is right there. So we can just read it. Yeah. You want me to read it?
Yeah,
All
please.
right. Hi there, Shannon and Sasha. Hope you both are well and enjoying spring. My organization, Luke 10, has been working on developing our grant proposal to submit in June for the Thriving Congregations Initiative. I have a question regarding how the grant defines congregations. We work to train and consult Christian leaders in all types of Christian expressions, from traditional churches to house church networks to collectives of micro churches, simple churches, and organic churches. We work with all of these types of congregations, some very traditional, most very non-traditional. Would the work we do with church planting groups count in the Thriving Congregations Initiative? Many of these are developing congregations seeking to structure themselves and their practices in a way that will reach their neighborhoods and family networks. Many of these small new communities were originally an attempt to adapt to the demands of the changing context these leaders found themselves in, but need coaching in how to understand their context, form their vision, mission, and values, and design practices that would achieve these results desired. Would these non-traditional collectives of Christ followers be considered congregations according to this grant initiative? Thank you so much for your time and your consideration, because I thought, I don't want to go through all that work if they're going to be like, these really aren't congregations. So I thought, what if we just ask them up front?
Yeah, can't hurt.
Yeah. What do you think, Sarah? How does that strike you?
Well, I think we kind of asked ourselves this question at the beginning, and according to their definition of congregation, they have a very broad definition. So at that point, we had decided that this work does qualify. So I don't know. I'm almost.
So why am I doing this? That's a great question, Sarah.
And now instead of
what I
at the
did,
beginning.
So I went back, and instead of just looking at the papers that and the online stuff that talks, the written stuff, I watched the video again of them walking through bit by bit the entire grant proposal process. And in that video, what hit me as I was deeply listening this time, not just overarching listening, was they have a very strong emphasis on traditional. What did they call it? They said, oh, did I write it down?
Innovative and traditional.
Traditional yet innovative, or something like that. So they're holding two tensions as an organization. And they mentioned that they said our definition of congregation is very broad. They said that. But when they talked about what they meant by that, they were like, Methodist, basically every denomination out there. Okay, Catholic, like basically if you call yourself a Christian, but you're a church, then that you're included. And as I heard them talk, I just thought, the way they're speaking, that I don't think it's ever even entered into their mind, the idea that a congregation could be three families gathering together every week. And they did say a congregation for us is a group. I did take notes on this. Where did I put my notes? It's a group that gathers weekly.
They mentioned worshiping together.
Yes. Here it is. They meet weekly to worship, teach, and extend care to each other and have acts of service and hospitality. So I'm like, okay, I mean, theoretically, we all could say we do those things, even we meet daily almost, some of us, but it is stretching them. It's going to stretch them. So I really did think, I just don't want to do all this work and then them come back without the imagination that they need. So I thought, what if we, and maybe Kent, you could help me create the imagination in this document or in this email, even further kind of draw out the imagination so that they can grasp it. That way, at least they're prepared for it when it comes, and they can say, oh, this is the one that's thinking outside the box, and congregations define differently, or they might come back and say, that's good, but define it for us, So I would love some guidance, because I have submitted a proposal before And it wasn't exactly what they were looking for, because we didn't talk enough about how we're planting churches. And so they denied it. And so I would hate to get denied because we weren't prepared good enough or well enough, and we didn't describe things good enough. So if we're denied, I want to make sure it's for the right reasons, if that makes sense.
No, I can see how walking that balance of using their imagination, activating their imagination, which could happen through just submitting the full grant proposal in the first place, but obviously not wanting to put all of that work into it if the preparation hasn't happened for them.
Yeah, I think it's a wise impulse anyway, Tony. My suggestion would be, if this group is comfortable with it, let's go ahead and run it by the mission group and get their take, and then make a decision at that point about whether to send some version of this. But I like your instinct that we can save a lot of unnecessary work if we're just not in their ballpark at all.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
shape it better if there's a way to present it that they would
Right.
accept it.
Yeah,
They would get it.
That's right. Yeah, if they offer us some feedback, say yes, and then we really want to know what that and is. What are the things that you most need to see as we think about your parameters?
Yeah, I hope they're innovative enough to know, we're not a denomination, but we're Jesus led, so maybe we'll become the Jesus ledists, and they can. I'm just kidding. That'd be terrible. But I think it's helpful to have this in the mission circle and see what they say.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you for your forethought. Yeah. Anything else for the work for today? Next steps from here, Tony or Kent, in the preparation for our last meeting next week.
I think Kent and I take this to the mission circle. I'd love for Kent to propose it to the mission circle. They don't fight with you as much as they fight with me.
Yeah, we can take it together. I'll hold your hand, Tony, as we go.
I'm going to push you out in front of me and hide behind you. All right. So I think that would be our next step. And Mission Circle meets this week, Kent, or is it? I think it is this week, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
This week. Okay. So we'll do that. And I would think we need a kind of a quick turnaround from them, because the whole thing is due by the 23rd of June. So I would hope that by the 6th, maybe, they could have us, because that just leaves us 2 weeks to finish this up. And we might need a breakout session of like 4 hours. I think, like all of us, it would be great to be able to be in the same place, but for lack of that possibility, we can get on a Zoom call for a while and do some work together, those of us who hash this out, I think.
Yeah. As we're coming to a close, Tony, do you want to give us the extra special Luke 10 live relational revolution?
Yeah, so this meeting has been very much a meeting. As you notice, though, those of you who were observing, who might have hung in here with us, we started with appreciation, and we start all of our meetings, even our kind of more business meetings, we start them that way. And then move into the work of our time working in rounds, as you may have noticed, and even our closing round. So we'll take a minute to us think of, what do we take away from our time together today? What seemed most important? And while we're listening, we're going to ask you guys out there to listen around what your next steps are, and if God would like you to fund this movement, this global movement. As you can see, we're seeking funding to hopefully continue this movement, but we are far, far from where we need to be in order to do what we do. So We're going for 3,000 extra a month in donations. We have 100 of that so far. So please let us know if you do give, so we can keep updating people on that. And there's a free audiobook. So if you become a new donor or you increase your donations, we do have a free audiobook we'd love to give you. So make sure that you click and claim it when you get the link for that. All right. So let's take a minute to listen and we'll do our closing round.
Anyone need more time? Tony, you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. I am so glad you're in this group, Sarah, because I enjoyed your the fact that you're engaging at this level of thinking with us, because not a lot of people like to engage at this level. I don't know if I like to engage at this level. In all honesty. And so the fact that you're giving your brain cells to this is incredible to me. And your critical thinking skills are invaluable. So just the comments you've already made, the things you're thinking, I'm like, wow, this is going to be so much better because you are critically thinking with us. So I am so happy that you're here. Makes me smile on the inside, makes me excited, makes me feel safer that we've got someone else in this with us. And then also just taking away a little excitement. I think we've been wanting to collaborate with Eden Center a little more closely for many years now, and just waiting for something to emerge. And even if this grant isn't going to emerge, still doesn't mean we don't move forward with some type of collaboration with Eden Center. So I wish I was going to be there tomorrow when that retreat starts, Kent, but next year I need to just go ahead and put it on the calendar. Maybe Sarah and I can find ourselves, and Jay can find ourselves all there next year for training. But that would delight my heart. So I was just getting super excited thinking about being in training with you and your community.
Thank you. Kent, how about you?
Yeah, the Lord's kind of given us an image of a sailboat that's underway, and the wind of the Spirit is in the sails. And there's things that you can see on a sailboat from a distance, the big sails, the waves crashing. But there's a lot of things that are going on that are not very visible. They're below decks. And in this meeting, I think we've gotten to look a little bit below decks at the operations of this organism that God has called together. And I just love the beauty of how the different parts work together to help us chart the course and help us continue to follow the good lead of the Spirit. So I'm loving the good conversation we've just shared.
Such good imagery. Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you, Tony, for your kind words. I've learned about sociocracy, but I've wanted to see how it actually works and have it modeled for me. So I just feel very privileged to be a part of this circle. And then for just listening now, just that same theme of like discovery and exploring that's kind of come up through this whole process of just take the next step and see where it goes, what happens. And I just saw kind of all these little paths. Some of them are more like little deer paths through this sunshiny woods, and even this path of sending this email to ask, do we qualify as congregations? That it's just one of those little paths too. And just, we don't know where it will go and what we'll discover there. But that it's still all part of the process of learning and discovering.
Beautiful. Thanks.
So good. For me, in my listening, I was brought to a picture of us banging on a door for bread. So I knew that was Luke 11, so I pulled that up. And Luke 11, I'll share this passage. And there's one phrase that jumped out. Then Jesus gave this illustration. Imagine what would happen if you were to go to one of your friends in the middle of the night, pound on his door and shout, "Please, do you have any some food that you can spare? A friend just arrived at my house unexpectedly, and I have nothing to serve him." But your friend says, "Why are you bothering me? The door is locked. My family and I are all in bed. Do you expect me to get up and give you our food? I tell you, because of your," here's the phrase, "shameless persistence," just jumped out. Shameless persistence. I'm not going to lose that. Even though it's the middle of the night, your friend will get up out of his bed and give you all that you need. Jesus continues, so it is with your prayers. Ask and you'll receive. Seek and you'll discover. Knock on heaven's door and it will one day open for you. Every persistent person will receive what he asks for. Every persistent seeker will discover what he needs. And everyone who knocks persistently will one day find an open door. And even as we're praying to the Lord of the harvest, he still has a way of us doing the work of pounding on doors. And I feel like these next 2 weeks, I want to be about that shameless persistence to the Lord of the harvest.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Love you
Good to
guys.
be with you,
And
friends.
some of us will see each other tomorrow for more Relational Revolution Live. Thank you so much, you guys. Have
Thank
a good
you.
night. There
Bye.
will be replays on all afternoon, probably from the meetings today. So they might even replay meetings from yesterday. I'm not sure. So if anyone's watching and you didn't get the meeting you wanted, stay tuned. Hillary will have a schedule soon of the replays. Love y'all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye for now, friends.